We continue in our study of the last week in the life of Jesus. It's amazing how much so in this last week of Jesus' life that not only how much we can learn from the things that he said, but in observing every single thing that he did in these last moments, in these last hours of his life on earth, there is a lesson within that. I did something a little different for this lesson. There's so much of what I do, you all don't realize this, and that's probably a good thing, but there's so much of what I do in ministry that to me is experimental, because I'm still a new minister. So many things I do, I'm doing for the very first time. And I try, I don't know how well I do this, I try to learn from the things that I think went over well, that worked well as far as presentation, and I try to throw out the things that didn't work so well. But I did something that I've wanted to do for a long time, but haven't had the guts to do. So this morning I'm trying it, okay? Our text is Matthew 26, 47 through 50. And I've included parallel text from Mark and Luke and John as we've been studying this last week. But this week, I did a harmony of all four of the text. So what we're going to do, we're going to see if this works. So they're all put together. Now, nothing is taken away and nothing is left out. And I feel like it gives a very complete picture of everything that happened at this one event. I'm going to begin by reading Matthew 26, verses 47 through 50, and then I'll read the harmonization of all of the text together. While he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, came up, accompanied by a large crowd with swords and clubs, who came from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now he who was betraying him gave them a sign, saying, "Whomever I kiss, he is the one, seize him." Immediately Judas went to Jesus and said, "Hail, Rabbi," and kissed him. And Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you have come for." Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. Okay, so now I'm going to do the harmony, and I left the letters in black. The words in black are Matthew's words. The ones in red are Mark's. The ones in blue are Luke's. And the ones in John's are green. Now, you don't have to remember that. I'll remind you as we go along, but that's just your frame of reference. I've made them those colors, and for no particular reason behind the colors. Those are just the first ones I picked. Let's see the harmony. Immediately, while he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, was preceding them, came up, accompanied by a large crowd with lanterns and torches and swords and clubs. The Roman cohort and officers who came from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people. So Jesus, knowing all the things that were coming upon him, went forth and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" They answered him, "Jesus the Nazarene." He said to them, "I am he." So when he said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Therefore he again asked them, "Whom do you seek?" And they said, "Jesus the Nazarene." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you seek me, let these go their way, to fulfill the word which he spoke, of those whom you have given me, I lost not one." Now he who was betraying him gave them a sign, saying, "Whomever I kiss, he is the one, seize him, and lead him away under guard." Immediately Judas went to Jesus and said, "Hail, Rabbi," and kissed him. But Jesus said to him, "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" And Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you have come for." Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. The text begins with the broken perimeter, if you'd like to follow along in the handout. The broken perimeter. Immediately, while he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, was preceding them, came up, accompanied by a large crowd. And you say, where's the broken perimeter? Well, we have to remember back to last week. while Jesus was speaking to his disciples, well, what was he saying to his disciples? He was saying, while he was saying to, remember, Peter and John and James, who he had brought further into the garden with him. So we have 8 that he left out further at one place. He had 3 that he brought in with him. And here's what he is saying to John and James and Peter. Are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. Behold, the one who betrays me is at hand. And it says, as Jesus is saying those words, immediately, he's still speaking. He's still finishing his sentence. Here comes Judas, and here comes the crowd. Well, he had set up a perimeter. Now, those that he had in close with him, James, Peter, and John, we know that they fell asleep. Well, what about the other 8? If Judas and this large crowd are able to come in without any warning whatsoever, what were the other disciples doing as well? Well, it doesn't say it in the text, so I think we can read between the lines very easily to say that everybody went to sleep this night except for Jesus, who spent the night in prayer. So the text begins with the broken perimeter. No one to run to Jesus and say, Jesus, there's a large crowd coming through the valley heading straight towards us. Next, we see in our text the anticipated chase. The anticipated chase. Judas came up accompanied by a large crowd with lanterns and torches and swords and clubs, the Roman cohort and officers who came from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people. So here they came. Now Jesus and his disciples, when they went out to the Mount of Olives, history tells us that during this time, they didn't have to go out to the Mount of Olives and to the Garden of Gethsemane with torches and with lanterns, because it was a full moon during this time. And they were able to, it's so bright in Israel during a full moon that you can walk around at night without having to carry a light. So why would the Romans and these officers from the chief priest, who would have been the temple police, why were they coming with lanterns and torches? Well, they were expecting, coming out to arrest Jesus, they were expecting some form of a resistance. And if not some form of a resistance, they were expecting to have to find him. They weren't expecting just to catch him right there in the open. They were expecting some form of a chase. They probably thought, well, we'll probably have to spend half the night, splitting up and looking all over the place for Jesus, because most likely, if he knows or if he thinks that we're coming or sees us coming, he's going to be hiding. Well, that doesn't end up being the case. Now, this Roman cohort, the Greek word for the Roman cohort here is spira. Spira. And a spira is 1/10 of a legion, or 600 legionnaires. So when it says Judas comes on, you may have seen paintings that people have done over the years, classical paintings and things, of this scene in the garden with, 5 or 6 or 7, people coming with torches. It wasn't that. That's how there were, imagine 600 Roman legionnaires. And then another part of a crowd, we don't even know how big it was. So somewhere between 600 and 700 people come out to arrest Jesus. Why? Well, Judas knew Jesus pretty well. He'd seen Jesus do many miraculous things. So he gathered the amount of people that he thought would be necessary to contain Jesus. Even though we knew Jesus pretty well, he still didn't know the first thing about him, truly, did he? Because if he did, he would have known that no force was going to be big enough to contain Jesus. So here come, and this is what the scene would have looked like. This is what these Roman legionnaires would have looked like, coming with their weapons and with their torches and coming to arrest this person who is, and how do you get those people to even come out? You couldn't get people to come out to arrest someone who hadn't done anything wrong. The Romans would never go for that. They weren't fools. They would have had to have been told or led to believe in one way or another that Jesus was some kind of a revolutionary who had a goal in mind of overthrowing Rome. It's the only way to get Rome to support your cause. And they would have had reason to believe that this was a real possibility, because just before this happened, and we're going to see evidence of this in our scripture coming up in the very near future, just before this happened, that very thing happened. There were some Jews, a group of Jews, that attempted a little bit of a revolution, and Rome crushed it. But Rome was always looking for these little things to pop up, because they always were. There was always some amount of resistance towards Rome that was trying to put together some kind of a movement to move against the Roman Empire. Why were there so many Roman soldiers in Israel at this time? Well, every time that the Jews hosted a feast or a festival like that was going on here at the Passover, Rome sent extra soldiers to the fort that was there within the walls of Jerusalem, the fort called Fort Antonius. They really beefed up their soldiers in anticipation of a revolution. Well, here's Jesus. Everyone's heard of him, and it's been whispered to Rome, this guy's a revolutionary. His aim is to overthrow the Roman government. Thus, here comes the soldiers. They probably think that they're coming into a great fight against a revolutionary leader with no telling how many followers and soldiers he has amassed himself in order to start the rebellion. That's why we have such a mob coming out to Jesus. Next, our next point is we see the omniscient Lord. Now, omniscient, that's just a fancy word for know-it-all, but know-it-all doesn't sound very nice. Jesus was a know-it-all, but not a know-it-all in the case of know-it-alls you have known. He actually knew it all. Okay? There was nothing that was outside of his knowledge. Verse 4 of John. So Jesus, knowing all things that were coming upon him. None of this was a surprise to Jesus. Jesus wasn't surprised in the least. Before Jesus went to the garden, he knew what kind of a mob was coming out to him. He knew, not only did he know how many soldiers were coming out to him, he knew all of their names. He knew all of their backgrounds. In fact, he's responsible for the creation of each person that came into that garden to arrest him that night. If they would have asked, he could have told them all how many hairs they had on their heads. There's nothing outside of his knowledge. He knew every single person there. Psalm 147, verse 5. Great is our Lord, and abundant in strength. His understanding is infinite. Nothing outside of his knowledge. 1 John 3:20. God is greater than our heart and knows all things. What is all things? All things. Fully inclusive. Nothing outside of his knowledge. Psalm 139:4. Even before there is a word on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it all. True then, still true now. Isaiah 46:9-10. Remember the former things long past, for I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is no one like me, declaring the end from the beginning. Before the world even existed, the Lord saw the beginning of it, and he saw the very last day, and everything in between. And from ancient times, things which have not been done, saying, my purpose will be established, and I will accomplish all my good pleasure. Why did Jesus die the death that he died? For God to accomplish God's good pleasure. It was all part of the plan. Next, we see in our text the last day preview. It's easy to miss, but we see a last day preview here in this text, specifically from John's text. So Jesus, knowing all the things that were coming upon him, went forth. Didn't hide, didn't run, didn't fight. He went to the trouble and said to them, now can you imagine this? You come out and you're expecting a fight, And here comes this guy walking out of the darkness, facing down the mob, cool as he can possibly be. No fear whatsoever. That in and of itself would be scary and intimidating, even though he's just one person. And he comes out and says, "Whom do you seek? Who you guys looking for? Nice night, huh?" They answered him, "Jesus the Nazarene." He said to them, "I am he." Now, what you miss in the text here, because the English translators have added the word he. That word he has been added. He doesn't say, "I am he." Jesus says, "I am." Ego eimi, the name of God. He says, "I am." So when he said to them, I am he, I am, literally, they drew back and fell to the ground. Now, why did they draw back and fall to the ground? These are Romans. They don't know the Old Testament. They don't know the names of God. They don't know who Jesus is. Hear this, church. They were forced to the ground. They didn't even understand why they fell to the ground. Who did Roman soldiers kneel to? No one. The emperor only, who they considered a god. Roman soldiers knelt to no man under any circumstance. Jesus says, "I am," and they fall on their knees. They didn't understand it. Exodus 3:13 and 14. The Lord sending Moses to Pharaoh. It says, "Then Moses said to God, 'They may say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them?' God said to Moses, 'I am who I am.' And he said, 'Thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me to you.'" That's what Jesus says. When they say, "We're looking for Jesus," he said, "I am." He got in trouble for this earlier in his ministry. John 8:56-59, speaking to the religious leaders of Israel. They're going back and forth with Jesus in argument, and Jesus said to them, "Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad." So the Jews said to him, "You are not yet 50 years old, and you have seen Abraham?" Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was born, I am." Ego eimi. And there is no doubt in their minds what Jesus is saying. He's saying, you're looking at God. And what did the law say that you did when a person claimed to be God? Verse 59, "Therefore they picked up stones to throw at him. But Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple." So here's Jesus in the temple, surrounded by people, in a giant mob of people, and he just disappears. He just vanished. Where'd he go? We don't know exactly what he did. Did he make himself invisible? Did he completely change his appearance? Did he walk through a wall? We don't know what he did. But here's what we do know. Whatever he did was supernatural. Jesus didn't have to run or hide or fight. He could do whatever he wanted to do anytime he wanted to do it. I stress this just because I want us to have a full understanding of Jesus is no victim in this garden on this night. Everything that's happening, Jesus is the puppet master here. He's pulling all the strings. Not Rome, not Judas, not the religious leaders. So when it says, Jesus, knowing all the things that were coming upon him, went forth and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" And they answered him, "Jesus the Nazarene." He said to them, "I am he." So when he said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Philippians 2:9-11. Here's how we see an end times preview in the garden that night. Paul wrote, "God highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name which is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus every knee will bow, of those who are in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and that every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father." When they all fell to the ground and didn't understand why, it was a shadow, it was a foreshadowing of the last day of all time, when all people on earth, whether they understand why they're doing it or what they're doing, even against their own will, every knee will bow and every tongue will say, "Jesus Christ is Lord." And you may be trying to stop your tongue from saying it. You won't be able to stop your tongue from saying it. It will be forced, those words will be forced out of every mouth on earth that has ever existed. Better to say it now on your own free will than be forced to your knees and forced to say it on that day, because that is what will happen. Next, we see in our text the final commands. And I want you to see these as commands because that's what they are. Therefore, Jesus again asked them, "Whom do you seek?" And they said, here they are now on the ground. Everyone's on the ground, and Jesus is still standing there. "Who is it you're looking for again?" Someone has to get the courage to pipe up and say, "Jesus the Nazarene." "I told you that. That's who I am. I told you I am. So if you seek me, let these go their way." Who are these? Well, his disciples, the 11. If you come to get me, they don't have anything to do with it. I'm just reaffirming, you came to arrest me, right? And only me. I didn't hear you say anybody else's names, just mine, right? Yes. Okay, let these guys go. They didn't do anything. So, and this happened to fulfill the word which he spoke, "Of those whom you have given me, I lost not one." It's the fulfillment of Scripture there. But I want you to see this too. I moved too fast. So there's two commands here. Jesus is saying, if you came to arrest me, arrest me. What are you waiting for? They didn't know what they were waiting for. They're eating dirt and not understanding why. He said, "Hey, get up and arrest me." It's a command, not a request. And look at the next command. He doesn't say, "Will you let these guys go?" Listen to what he says. "If you seek me, let these go." He's not asking. He's telling them, let these guys go. They don't have any choice. They have to let them go. Jesus just told them. Jesus can force his will if he chooses. And he says, let them go. Next, we have the last words for Judas, what I've named this sermon as well. The last words for Judas. The sad thing, in the 3.5 years Judas has been with Christ, the words that he has heard Jesus say over all these years, in the teaching that we know about, word for word, that we study in the Gospels, and no telling how many nights, all the different words that Jesus has said to the disciples that he's heard, that he has said directly to Judas over these years. And these are the last ones. Last words Jesus will ever speak to Judas. "Now he who was betraying him gave them a sign, saying, 'Whomever I kiss, he is the one. Seize him and lead him away under guard.' Immediately Judas went to Jesus and said, 'Hail, Rabbi,' and kissed him. But Jesus said to him, 'Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?' And Jesus said to him, 'Friend, do what you have come for.'" Now you say, was this necessary? Wasn't it enough just for Judas to bring them to where they knew Jesus was going to be? Well, they probably suspected a trick, some kind of a trickery. They may have expected, Judas may have said something along the lines of like, "Now look, there's a guy who's real close to Jesus named Peter. Peter may step up and say, 'I'm Jesus. I'm him.'" Throughout the history of warfare in Israel, there had been things similar to this that had happened, to where the Romans thought they were arresting someone, but someone volunteered to be the person they thought was going to be, and they arrested the wrong person. So they work out this thing beforehand with Judas. They're like, "You know him?" And Judas is like, "Yeah, I know him. I'm one of his disciples. I've been with him for 3.5 years. He's not going to trick. I will show you which one he is. And I will show you by giving him a kiss. Now it's bad enough that it's a betrayal by Judas. But to betray someone with an intimate sign of affection, it's like giving someone a hug right before you kill them, pretending that you love them, pretending that you care about them. It's just insult to injury, and it's a terrible, despicable thing that Judas does here. Notice the words added there in the red. Judas also added, when he gave the instructions, whomever I kiss, he's the one, seize him and lead him away under guard. Like, surround him, put spears on him. This guy, I mean, he can do things that you couldn't imagine. So, as long as we have a whole cohort, that's probably going to be enough. We can contain him with that. But make sure that you keep him under guard. And Jesus says to him, 2 lines, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? And of course he was. And Jesus said to him, now this word friend, that's a poor translation. This isn't the word that's typically translated as friend. This is a word that basically means like guy or fellow. It's how you would refer to a person whose name you don't remember. Okay? Now I usually refer to people whose name I can't remember as Buddy. So if I call you Buddy, sorry. You don't know. I may have temporarily forgotten your name. No, I never call women Buddy, only guys. I don't know what I say to women that I can't remember their names. Anyway, that's neither for here nor there. I'll think about it and let you know next week. But Jesus doesn't say to him, Judas. He doesn't say to him the word that's typically used for someone that you're close to, like an affectionate friend. He says to him, hey, guy, as if he doesn't know him. He treats him like a stranger. Jesus says, hey, man, do what you've come for. Get it over with. And those are the last words Jesus speaks to Judas. Next, we have the tolerable arrest. Why is it tolerable? Because Jesus tolerated it. Jesus allowed himself to be arrested. It's the only way it ever would have happened. And what's his charge? What's he being charged with? Has anyone said that? No. Because what could they say? And notice Jesus doesn't say either, why are you arresting me? Why'd you come to arrest me? What would they say if he said that? They may have had some pre-thought out answer they were going to give, but probably not. They were just arresting him. This is just like, imagine you're just sitting at home this afternoon and the police come into your home and arrest you. They don't say a word. They just come in and slap the cuffs on and lead you out and throw you in the back of the patrol car and haul you down to the jail. No reason given, no reason asked for. They came and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. Now, I'll talk about this verse is going to play into next week's lesson, so I'm just going to leave it alone for now. But just know this: he was arrested because he allowed them to arrest him. That's it, and that's all. Jesus is teaching in more than what he says here in this text. Are we listening to what he says through his actions? Let's see what he's saying here. Number one, he's saying, don't fear men. Through his teaching, he's saying, don't fear people. Here's this mob coming for Jesus, and what does Jesus do? He walks out and he meets them. Proverbs 29:25 teaches us, the fear of man brings a snare, but he who trusts in the Lord will be exalted. What do people do when they're afraid? Well, a lot of times they do compromising things. A lot of times they do things they shouldn't have done. And when a Christian is afraid, at the base of a Christian's fear is a lack of trust in what God is doing. So don't fear men. Jesus even taught this. Jesus taught these words in Matthew 10:28. Do not fear those who kill the body, but are unable to kill the soul. Like, don't be afraid of people. All people can do is kill you. That sounds pretty severe, doesn't it? But he says, all a person can do is kill you. That's the worst they can do. Don't be afraid of people that can just kill you. Fear, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Don't fear people, fear God. People aren't worthy of being feared. They can hurt they can hurt this outer shell, but they can't touch your soul. God can. Worry about that. So don't fear men. And Jesus exemplifies that in the garden. Next, make God's will your will. Now, that was last week's lesson. Jesus prayed the 3 times in the garden that we saw. If there's a way that this cup of your wrath can be taken from me, then do it, Lord. But if not, your will be done, not mine. And he says that 3 times. Not my will, but yours be done. Not my will, but yours. And then, when he gets his answer from God, this is my will, Jesus then goes forth with what he knows God's will is. He makes he aligns his will perfectly with God's. And we can do the same. Matthew 6, 9, and 10. Jesus taught us to pray this way if we listen to his teaching. Pray then in this way, a part of this teaching. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Church, I would encourage you to pray that God's will be done so often that it becomes true in your life. Fake it until you make it. You won't always want God's will over yours, but if you consistently say to God, God, I want what you want because I know that's best, your will be done. Say it until you mean it, and it will become your life as it was Jesus' life. Luke 9:23, and he was saying to all of them, Jesus was saying to all of them, if anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. This is a picture of my will, what I want, dying on a daily basis. Jesus saying, if you want to follow me, then Wes, you have to kill your personal will on a daily basis, because your will is going to try to take over God's will on a daily basis. But if you want to follow me, kill your will daily and follow me. That's what it takes to be one of my followers. That's what it takes to do God's will. So make God's will your will. Jesus accepted God's will, and he's going forward with it. The next that we see, to do God's will, sometimes you have to walk alone. Oftentimes, to do God's will, you have to be the only one that goes. Jesus is the only one going with the crowd. He's the only one being arrested. He's the only one going with the mob. And it may look like, through the eyes of everyone in the world, oh man, that guy must be the worst criminal. He must be one of the worst criminals in the land to have that kind of a crowd come out to arrest him. And he was 100% innocent. We sing in the song that we'll sing as our invitation today, what will you do with Jesus? There's these wonderful words. Jesus is standing in Pilate's hall, friendless, no friends with him, forsaken, people saying, his friends pretending that they don't even know him, betrayed by all, betrayed by his own people, the Jews, betrayed by the religious leaders, betrayed by those who were his best friends who followed him for 3.5 years. To do what's right, sometimes you have to do it alone. And that has to be okay. You have to be okay with that. It has to be enough to you to know that what you are doing is right in God's eyes. And that has to be what's most important. That has to be what matters most. Lastly, Jesus teaches us to expect persecution. To expect it. Now, I think in the day that we live. We're starting, the church in the land that we live is starting to warm up more to the idea of persecution. But I think there was a mindset for many years that still continues today, that because we live where we live and go to church where we go to church, we don't have to worry about persecution. That's for other people in other places in the world. Church, let me tell you, persecution is on our doorstep. It's always been, persecution has always existed, but it is coming in a way that we have never experienced before. It can be a very real thing in the future. Expect it. John 16:33, Jesus says, after he teaches his disciples many things there at the Last Supper, "These things I have spoken to you, so that in me you may have peace." He's saying, in me you're going to have peace. You're not going to have peace in the world, but in me you can have it. Doesn't matter what's going on in the world. If you have me, you can still have peace. In the world, you have tribulation. The NIV says trouble. In this world, you will have trouble. But take courage. I have overcome the world. Don't worry about it. As long as you're following me, don't worry about what's going on. Don't be afraid. Follow me and do what's right. Expect trouble to come. It's coming. 1 Peter 4:12 and 13, Peter. Now look, this is Peter who didn't get it. And but later on down the line, he did get it. And this is Peter once the light switch is flipped on, okay? And look at how Peter has changed since Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. "Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal among you, which comes upon you for your testing, as though some strange thing were happening to you." He's saying, when you're persecuted, don't think that it's a strange thing. It's not. Expect it. Now, if you would have told this to young Peter in the garden with Jesus, he wouldn't have believed you. So now Peter has learned his lesson and is teaching others he's teaching others to succeed where he failed. Verse 13, "But to the degree that you share the sufferings of Christ, keep on rejoicing." Peter's like, that's what I missed. I thought it was a terrible thing to suffer. It was actually a good thing to suffer with Christ. But I missed the point. I got it now. So you all do what I didn't. "So that also at the revelation of his glory you may rejoice with exultation." To expect to suffer for Christ. Suffering is coming because of Christ. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And one day it will become a great thing in your life that you endured it. Through all this teaching, here's what I want you to see more than anything else, though. See Jesus being arrested in the garden. Don't allow any of these other teachings. Either they're all good teachings, they're all good biblical teachings, but don't miss what's going on before our very eyes. See Jesus being arrested in the garden. That's what we're to see in this text. All focus on him. And then answer yourself this very important question. The question that everyone has to answer. You may have already answered it. You may need to answer it. You may have not made up your mind. But the Lord is asking you today, here's Jesus. What will you do with him? Have you made him your Lord and Savior? He is Lord and Savior. Have you accepted that? Have you bowed the knee to Christ? Have you confessed him? Have you obeyed his first great command for anyone who says, yes, I'll follow Jesus? Jesus says, you'll follow me? Confess me before people and be baptized. Have you done so? If not, today can be the day. Or if you have done so, but you're not following Christ, today can be the day that you get yourself back on track to following Christ the way that you once claimed that you would. If there's any way we can serve you today, please come forward as we stand and as we sing.
Jesus is standing in fire. Friendless, forsaken, betrayed.